Hey everybody, JB back with you once again for another cube on the board game shelf setup run through. We are on the second cube, and this is the one where the setup kind of starts shifting more toward shelf optimization and publisher groupings. So it's not particularly evident with this one alone, but some of the games that are featured here are adjacent to other ones that are in shelves next to it that are by the same publisher. So we're going to go through some of these, and it'll become a little bit more evident what the groupings are as we move on into future videos. But the first publisher that's represented here is on the left side with AEG, or Alderock Entertainment Group. And I wanted to call them out on something here that I thought was really cool that they did last year when they made this announcement. This announcement basically said, hey, we're going to stop producing tons and tons of games and instead devote our time more to developing them so that they can be really good. And so as a result of that, we're going to be putting out fewer games. First of all, kudos to them for this move. I think this is something that more board game publishers need to be aware of. There's just too much out there. And if you're going to make it, you really need to stand out. I think this is a very good way to stand out, to pour in more effort into making sure that the products you put out are of good quality. So a huge kudos to them on that. One of their quality products is right here. Love Letter. This is a game that came out, I think, in 2014, and it kind of sparked a revolution in what a lot of people call micro games, little tiny games that don't have a lot of components or a lot of rules, but fit into a nice portable box and can be carried anywhere and taught to most people. This game has had, I think, a profound impact on the tabletop industry. There have been so many games that have imitated this game, but I don't think any of them have matched the popularity of Love Letter. Some people also say that this game has drawn a lot of attention to smaller publishers from Japan and whatnot, and that cannot be understated because there are a lot of talented designers who come from Japan, and I think this game did help put them on the map. So we look here at the back of the box, we can kind of get a little bit of a feel for at least what's in the game. It doesn't really tell you a lot about how the game is played. But essentially, the way this game works is that you have only 16 cards. That's all there is in terms of the components that you use to play out a round. You remove one card from the game, and then you deal out one card from what's remaining, the 15 that you have left, to all the different players. And then on your turn, you get to pick one card from the draw pile and then play one of the two cards that you have in your hand, resolving whatever's on the card. So there are 9 kinds of cards, and each of them has their own special ability. Wait, it's not in here. It's over on a reference card here. Yeah, all of these cards that have a certain distribution in the deck and a certain power. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is you're trying to identify what other people have so that you can either eliminate them or survive long enough so that you can be the last person standing at the end of the round. And whoever has the highest value card will, at the end of the round, if there's multiple people, will be the winner. This game is really cool because although it gives you these cubes for tracking who won, what I like about it is that you don't have to play up until the amount that they tell you to play. Like, I think they say 4 wins. 4 wins for 4 players. I'm looking here at the rules. For 2 players, it's 7, and 3 is 5. You don't have to go by that. You can just play how many ever rounds you want. And that makes it a great, what a lot of people call a filler game for whenever you have time to play something, maybe at a game night when you're kind of unsure about when another group is going to finish, or maybe you're waiting on people to arrive. I love that. I think that's a really great ability to have, just that freedom to play how many ever rounds you want, because the rounds are only like 5 minutes long. I mean, they don't take that long, if even that. You don't really spend a lot of time playing a round of Love Letter. It's also worth noting that this game, it takes place in this Tempest universe. It's like a shared universe of different games that were published. I don't know if they were by the same designer, but none of the other ones really made it quite as big as this one. It's also spawned a bunch of different spin-off love letters, like there's Batman Love Letter and other ones as well, but this is the one that's definitely sold the most. So if you're looking for just a very quick card game for a group that has a little bit of deduction and just a very limited rule set that you can have a lot of fun with. Check out Love Letter. It's a good game. All right, moving from the small box end of the spectrum to the very large box end of the spectrum, we have Space Base, and I'm just going to stand it up here because it's going to be hard to hold that with one hand on camera. Space Base is a game that's designed by John D. Clare, who's done a lot of design work for AEG as a publisher. I have to admit, I'm very ashamed to say that I was kind of cold on this game when I first heard about it, and partially just because the artwork looked a little chintzy when I first saw it. It kind of had a very cartoonish space look to it, but it didn't really do a whole lot as far as a unique look or anything like that that really made it stand out. And then I read the rule book, which is probably what I should have done in the first place, and I realized, oh my goodness, this could be really, really fun. So I'm going to turn this around so you can see what's on the back. By the way, this box is an expansion box that's meant to hold the base game and all the expansion content. If you bought this game, it comes in a box about the size of this one that's right above it that I'm going to go over next here. The way the game works is very interesting, and the best thing I can describe it to that a lot of or compare it to that a lot of people know about is Catan. If you've played Catan, or Settlers of Catan, or Settlers, some people just call it that, you know this mechanism of rolling dice and getting stuff as a result of rolling the dice. You roll like a 4, and if your pawn or your buildings and stuff are next to the 4 slot on the board, then you get whatever that spot produces. This game basically takes that and it basically just runs with it and cranks it up to 11. And by crank it up, I don't mean like makes it complicated, but rather it focuses on it and just doubles down on that whole production element. So each player has this board right here, and these boards have 12 slots for the different numbers. The whole board is meant to represent kind of like a command ship that has a lot of different spaceships docked in it. So if you've ever watched like Return of the Jedi, for example, and there's that scene where they are on the Rebel transport carrier, and Lando and Han are talking, and there's all those ships docked there, all the X-Wings and the Y-Wings and the Millennium Falcon. This is basically kind of like that, where you're commanding one of those ships, and you're managing all the ships that are docked there, and then sending them out into space. So what you do is you have these 12 starter cards and you slot them into these different numbers. They're actually specifically labeled. And on your turn, you roll the dice. You roll 2 dice. You can use the dice to either activate the sum of the dice or the individual ones. So if I rolled a 4 and a 5, I could either do a 9 or the individual 4 and the 5. And this decision is so simple, but it's so meaty because the way you develop your board and the things you get is really, really satisfying when you can get that one good roll that gives you all that loot that you were really hoping for. I love the fact that this game, as far as its objective, is very simple. Like Catan, it's a race to a certain point threshold, in this case 40 points. But there's actually different ways you can get there, which I really like. You'll see here that there's a central market of cards. These ones over here are like permanent cards that give you points, but then you can't really put new cards into that slot. But these cards, if you buy a card with the gold that you're producing, you slot it into the number here, and then what you do is you take what's there and you deploy it. You flip it over, and now it's on its other side where you can use whatever the benefit is on there and get it whenever someone else rolls the dice. And that is huge. I love that. The fact that you can continually be involved in the game on other people's turns is amazing. There's different things you could do. You can get, you'll see it here, you can get money. Here you can get income, which helps you start with more money whenever you end your turn. And then you have all these special abilities, like things where you can put cubes on the cards. It doesn't actually have a picture of it here, but there are cards that have activation thresholds where you put cubes on them that you can get from just activating the number. And then once they're filled with the necessary amount of cubes, you can then take all the cubes off to take advantage of whatever their special ability is. There are some that allow you to say, hey, if you activate the sum of the dice, like if I activated that 9 I talked about, I can skip over to the 10 or the 11 instead of going to the 9. And of course, 10 and 11 are more rare results for rolling 2 dice, so you may want to get that. It's such a satisfying game to play. There's also one really funny card that's literally called You Win. And if you buy this card, you have to put it in the 12 slot, but it requires 3 or 4 cubes to activate, and it has to be on your turn. Like the blue background here means your turn, red background means other people's turns. It has to be on your turn. So the chances of you rolling like 3 12s the whole game is probably not very high. But if you can get another card that says swap your 12 and your 5 slot, oh my goodness, now your chances have just gone through the roof. It's an amazing game. This is one I highly recommend to anybody who loves Catan and just that whole engine development that you've experienced in that game. It's a great game. One of my highest recommendations for families who are looking for something to play during quarantine. All right. I'm sure you've had enough of me talking about that one. Let's move on to this one. A much different game called Mental Blocks. Now, Mental Blocks was actually a game I picked up from the publisher directly last summer at Gen Con in Indianapolis. And they were demoing it with these really giant foam blocks that were, I don't know, maybe about 3 times the size of what's in here. I'll open it up so I can show you how this works, because you kind of have to see the components to know. So it comes with these blocks. They're kind of like those bathtub foam blocks that you used to play with when you were a kid. They're different sizes and they're different shapes. So I just showed you a kind of a rectangular prism one. This is like a cube one. This is a triangular one. This game involves taking a set of cards. So there's a whole bunch of cards in here. I'll show you right there. That whole box there is filled with tons of cards. And these cards have a puzzle printed on them. I'll try to get, yeah, there you go. I accidentally put these in the wrong order there. But you have to play with these 4 cards. And what these are 4 different perspectives from the different cardinal directions facing the structure that you're trying to build. It's a 3D structure. And you can see here there's really no depth to any of these images. You don't really know what exactly the shape of what you're building is. All you know is that it covers about this much volume, or sorry, this much, what's that called, surface area from your side at least. And if you can communicate, oh, it's 2 by 2 and apparently by 2, since it's 2 by 2 from all of our sides, then you can start working on what this is supposed to look like. And you can see the lines in here that delineate between when one block begins and another block ends, which is pretty neat. You can add more players to the game and give them these cards right here, which show you isometric views of the structure, but not any colors or any breakpoints for where blocks begin and end. I love this game. It's unlike any cooperative game I've ever played. You have to do this in 10 minutes. It's real time. You have to negotiate and collaborate with each other as far as what goes where, what you're seeing, trying to describe what it is that you've got in your hand without showing the card. But then you have these things, and it's like, okay, if I can describe that I'm seeing that there's 2 blocks on the top layer, but they're diagonal from each other, I mean, that's not something that you can easily glean from this, right? So, I mean, this is a pretty simple structure, but there's ones that are way more complex. And by the time you're done, you can go and compare your structure to the answer key here. Now, one thing you could do that the game allows you to do, and I don't recommend it, is that you can play with a traitor, a hidden traitor, who gets this card and tries to mess up the whole thing, and if you identify them, you win. I don't think that's necessary. I feel like that actually kind of makes the game a little bit more convoluted, if anything. But I love the variety of puzzles in this game. There are 60 that come with the game. There are promos that you can buy with more of them. It's a really fun cooperative game and kind of unlike anything I've really ever played before. A lot of cooperative games focus on either literal or figurative firefighting, where you're trying to respond to a crisis, and this one is just an abstract puzzle, and it's a lot of fun. All right, moving on, we've got King of Tokyo. King of Tokyo is a very, very fun dice-chucking game from Richard Garfield, who designed Magic the Gathering, probably his most famous work. And it's essentially a Yahtzee-style game, much like Bang the Dice game. Instead of social deduction, though, you're playing one giant game of King of the Hill. I love the comic book look to this, where you are invading Tokyo. You can only have one monster in Tokyo at any given point, so you're trying to goad the monster that's there into getting out so you can get in, but then you have to decide, do I want to stay in here and get attacked by everybody, or do I leave instead? And you can win either by being the last monster standing or by getting points by rolling certain dice. It works just like Yahtzee, where you roll the dice 3 times and you get a couple re-rolls there. You can get claws to attack other people, hearts to heal yourself. You can get energy that you can use to buy these special, use my other hand here, these special cards to upgrade your monster. And then you've got the points here where you get 3 of a kind and you can get whatever the number of points is there. And you get 20 points, you win. Very simple game, but a lot of fun in a big group. You got this, just this very raucous atmosphere of monsters roaring and, very campy, sort of B-movie feel to this whole thing, and it's just a blast. There's an expansion that adds special powers to each of the monsters, which I have in here, as well as special expansion monsters that add new rules to the game, but just the base game is a lot of fun. Okay, moving to a very popular party game, Telestrations. This game I was originally introduced to back in 2011 when a friend of mine in California just presented us with like a pencil and paper version of this, not even in this box. And I believe the pencil and paper version is called Eat Poop You Cat or something like that. I have no idea why it's called that. I'm glad it's gotten republished as Telestrations, because that's a much better name for it. The best way I can describe this game is it's Chinese Whispers, or the game of telephone, but combined with Pictionary. But unlike Pictionary, you don't have to be good at drawing to have fun with this game. What you do is that you get this little flip book here, and you get like a secret word. You roll a die, and whatever the number is, you get that secret word or phrase, and then you write that on the front of your book. Now, next person's going to draw something, the next person is going to guess that, and then the next person's going to draw that, the next person's going to guess that, and so on and so forth, until you have your book come back around to you, and you have this mutation that you never thought you'd ever have. So like in this example, we have doggy bag that got turned into man purse. I've seen some pretty weird ones where I think one of them that we had in one of my groups was prison break, and it somehow ended up with French kiss. That is not a joke. That is an actual evolution of what happened in this game. It is so fun. The game comes with a scoring system, but honestly, you do not need to score this game. You play it for the laughs. You don't need to score it. It's so just plain fun to do with a group. There is a version of this that goes up to 12 players, which I kind of wished I had instead of this one, but even just this 8-player one is a lot of fun. All right, and finally, we once again saved my favorite here for last with Sheriff of Nottingham. Now, this is the first game that I have from the Arcane Wonders Dice Tower Essentials line, indicated by that logo down there. This game is a very fun bluffing and bribery-oriented game, and it's a raucous time. It is just such a funny game to play. The premise of it is that you're a bunch of merchants who are trying to sneak your wares into the city of Nottingham, but the sheriff is not having any of it. He's trying to make sure that you're not sneaking contraband inside the city. So all these items with the green border around them, these items are okay, but these red ones, these are bad. So like the good items are things like apples, bread, chicken, cheese, and then we have the bad items, the contraband items of meat and crossbows, of course, and silk and whatnot. So they sell for more, which is why you want to smuggle them in. But what you do is at the very start of the round, one person is declared the sheriff for the round. You say, hey, you're gonna be your turn to be the sheriff at this point. And then everybody else goes to the market and trades cards out. And this is all open information when they're doing it. So when the sheriff sees you, he sees you taking that crossbow in order to get to that chicken, and you could be like, "Oh, sheriff, I promise I'm good. I'm just taking this crossbow. It's all fine and dandy and whatnot." And then you have to load your bag up here secretly. You don't really you don't show anybody this when you're doing it. And so no one knows what you have in that bag, but then you have to declare to the sheriff what you have. and the number must be true, the number of cards, but you have to say, I have that number of one kind. So I have to say, like, I have 3 apples. But you don't have to have apples. You can have 2 apples and a crossbow, for example. And it's up to the sheriff to determine whether or not you're lying or you're telling the truth. And if he thinks you're lying, or if they think you're lying, then you might get your bag opened up. And this is where the fun happens. Either you're telling the truth and the sheriff has to pay this penalty, or you are not telling the truth and you have to pay the penalty. And it's just such a fun game. It's such a fun game to role play and to just ham it up for the sheriff. And of course, the bribery is just off the charts hilarious. Like, other people could butt into the whole conversation, and while the sheriff is deciding whether or not he wants to open bags or not, and go like, well, I'll pay you $10 to open up that person's bag. It's just so cool. Love Sheriff of Nottingham. It's one of my favorites party style games. It's almost in my top 10. It's easily in my top 20. Just a solid game all around. There's a bit of lid lift on this box because I have the Merry Men expansion here, which adds even more incentive, shall we say, to try to get contraband inside. But anyway, that is today's video. That was 6 games. Next time we are going to be moving onward to this shelf over here, which has a little bit more in it. And this one has kind of an interesting variety, so I'm really excited about doing this one. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that bell so you can get notified of the next episode, and I will catch you on the next one. So take care, and I will see you then.